Should we start?
Yes.
All right. So just to set expectations, we're not going to do a full 3-course banquet like the last time for Tu B'Shvat. We're just going to make some Hamantaschen together.
Okay. Good.
But it's going to be fun. So, let me get the magazine to show as always. Shoshana, tell them about that.
Leead didn't actually make up this recipe. We've been getting a magazine called Fleischig's Magazine, which is the equivalent of Bon Appetit, but for the Orthodox community. It's an excellent magazine.
It's my favorite thing ever.
It's an excellent magazine. We're a little obsessed, and we always find inspiration.
They feature a online baker who sells cocktail Hamantaschen, and they gave her recipe for mojito Hamantaschen. Actually, I tagged her in the Facebook post, and she liked it, which is cute. But
so that's what we're making today.
That's what we're gonna make today. So we're gonna make mojito Hamantaschen. I'm sure all of us are experienced drinkers, so we all know what is in a mojito. But if we're not, a mojito
I don't know what's in a mojito.
a mojito is usually rum, mint, lime, or some sort of citrus, and then a bunch of ice. And it's usually like a sweet, rummy, fruity drink.
Like a tropical sweet.
So what's interesting about the mojito Hamantaschen is that instead of just having a plain sugar cookie dough like most Hamantaschen, and then a filling, the mojito Hamantaschen flavors the dough with mint, and the filling it flavors with rum and lime, and together they make a mojito, which is fun. But so what we're gonna do is first, I'm gonna just make a general Hamantaschen dough, because Shoshana and I realize we're probably going to need a lot of Hamantaschen.
Are you gonna narrate and I'm gonna pour things in?
Oh, we can do it that way, sure. We can do it that way with I'll narrating and put things in. Yes. But so first we're gonna make a double batch. We're gonna make just a plain dough, and then we'll separate it in half, and then at the end we'll mix in the specific mojito requirements. So of course, as always, we're using my favorite kitchen appliance, the stand mixer, because that's what I live for. My kitchen is stand mixer over here. But
where's the beater though?
Oh no, where is the beater?
All right, canceled.
No, it's right there in the drying rack.
Okay.
So of course, feel free to do this by hand or with a hand mixer. I feel bad I didn't post the ingredients yet. Much like last time, I'm going to post the ingredients afterwards. So I don't think anyone's really cooking along at home. But the truth is, and we'll see this together, this is a particularly hard recipe to cook along at home, because when you use a sugar cookie dough, the temperature is really important. Because if it gets too warm, the butter in the cookie melts, and then you can't really maneuver it. So we've already prepared some dough in the fridge that we're going to be using. You're really going to have to chill this dough, so no one's really fully cooking at home anyways. Yeah. But we're going to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. We're going to get ahead of our Hamantaschen game, and we're going to do a Hamantaschen game.
So the butter recipe is from the Fleischig magazine.
Exactly. Exactly.
I know, they do have some dairy, they have some dairy things in there.
Yeah.
But mainly it's meat.
So to start with our stand mixer, first we got to snap it into place. Nice. So first we're going to put in 2 sticks of butter. Shoshana will be our displaying what we're putting in. So obviously we're not using real butter.
Do I cut them up or just pop it in?
You just pop it in because we're using stand mixer. We're not using real butter because we want to keep it pareve. And I have very strong feelings on fake butter. So we can discuss that a little bit today too. So we're using Earth Balance fake butter, which is by far my favorite. I didn't realize that Earth Balance makes baking bars in addition to the fake spread. It's really good for cookies and pastries, but it's also expensive. So when I make the cookie, I use Earth Balance because for the cookie, it's a sugar cookie, and the butter you use is really important. When I make the filling, I just use the cheap Fleischmann's margarine because I don't think it really makes a difference. But my dad actually swears off margarine and won't let me buy it. If he sees, he gets really upset because of how artificial it is. So we don't use a lot of margarine.
Earth Balance is
the go-to. Okay, so we put in 2 sticks of butter or butter alternative. We use our Earth Balance, and to that we're going to add the sugar. So we're going to add, because again we're doubling this recipe, we're going to add 1 1/3 cup of sugar. Yeah, that's perfect. So we add the sugar. And then, like most cookie recipes, the first step is always going to be to cream the butter and sugar. So I'll come and bring it close so you can all see. Butter and sugar. And then we're just gonna cream it. So first you start on low. If you're either doing it by hand, electric mixer, stand mixer, you start on low to break up the butter a little and to moisten it. And then after a little bit, you can raise it to medium. Yeah, you can raise it to medium.
Yes, sir.
And it's about to get a little bit loud. You can see. And at this point, it's actually very important that you beat the air into the butter, because one of the mistakes that I've often made with cookies is that often when I make cookies, they'll just spread out, and you'll have this flat spread cookie, and it's a disaster. So there's 2 things that can cause that. One thing that can cause that is that the temperature of the dough isn't cold enough. So the butter, the fat in the dough is melting before you bake it. Another issue is how the cookie expands. You want to make sure that when you bake the cookie, it's going to expand upward and outward and not just spread out when it bakes. So one way to do that is to ensure that you beat air into the butter. And also we're going to be adding baking powder. And baking powder also ensures an aerated dough. So I think we beat the butter in, so we're going to turn it off now. So in addition to our now nicely creamed, our creamed butter and sugar, or fake butter here, or balance and sugar, we're now going to add some of our flavoring. So we're going to add 2 eggs and 2 egg yolks. So we have here, excuse me, 2 eggs pre-cracked over here and checked for blood and all that.
No, it's yolk, 2 yolks plus.
Oh, right there. And then in addition to the 2 whole eggs, there's 2 egg yolks. And we separated out the egg whites and put them aside. We'll use those later on in the recipe to assemble the Hamantaschen. But for now, we're just going to add 2 egg yolks in addition to the 2 eggs to enrich the dough. We'll add those 2 egg yolks in there. You can just scrape out the...
Yeah, I got it.
Perfect. So those are the yolks. And then we'll
How
turn
much
on the little... Sorry, what was that?
How much sugar?
Oh, so 1 1/3 cup.
Thank you.
For sure. To 2 sticks of butter. And yeah, and I'll be posting the recipe after, but feel free to take notes and follow along also. For sure.
Oh, okay.
And then 2 eggs and 2 yolks. And then we're going to turn it on. Beat the eggs a little bit. Let them also get a little aerated and puffy. And then after a little bit of beating the eggs, we're going to introduce the flavoring. In this case, for the basic, we're just going to do vanilla. So we'll let it beat a little. Then we'll go and we'll take 2 teaspoons of vanilla. We want to show everybody our vanilla extract. Nothing too fancy, just a little bit of vanilla. We'll add that in, swirl that in. Okay.
It looks pretty wet.
Perfect. So stop it now. Great. So Shoshana noted at this point our dough is very wet. And why is it so wet?
Oh, because you didn't put the flour.
We didn't put the flour in it. Exactly. So now that we've whipped our butter, we've beaten our butter and creamed our butter and sugar, added in our flavors. Now we can go and take the heart of our mixture, the flour here. And here we have 4 cups of sifted flour. Just pre-sifted it before, so nice and airy, no clumps. And we'll take and add to these 4 cups of sifted flour, we'll add some baking powder and some salt. So it's going to be a 1/4 teaspoon of kosher salt. And interesting or important to note, the reason to use kosher salt is because it has a thicker grain granule, but that also means that the volume to weight difference in kosher salt is different from fine grain salt. So if you don't have kosher salt at home, if you don't have thick grain salt at home, you're using normal salt, always have the salt. Because have it, always have it. Right. Kosher salt is always going to be twice as much volume per weight. So 8 grams of kosher salt will be twice as much as 8 grams of fine salt.
Rabbi, which kosher salt are you using?
Oh, perfect. So this is another important question. I think, was that Phyllis who asked?
Yep.
Perfect. So every kosher salt, because what makes kosher salt unique is the thick grain, every kosher salt actually has a different unique grain. So I use diamond crystal kosher salt, partially because Shoshana went shopping last and she picked it up, but also because one of my favorite cookbooks who we used in our last cooking class, Brave Tart by Stella Parks, that's their standard for when they measure out things. So I just use that as my standard too, because it's easier to make sure I'm being precise. But so we have a 1/4 teaspoon of kosher salt that we're going
I lost.
Can you hear me?
Oh, okay.
So we're going to take a 1/4 teaspoon of kosher salt and mix that into the flour, the sifted flour mixture.
And the baking powder.
And in addition to that, we're going to add 1 1/2 teaspoons of baking powder. So just add some baking powder, some salt into the flour. The baking powder, as we said, keeps it aerated. It's actually very interesting. I was looking up in preparation for this. The history of baking powder in America is apparently like a whole thing. It's like a very recent relatively recent invention. People used to just use like cream of tartar and basically effectively make their own baking powder out of baking soda. But thank God we live in the future, so we could just buy a little thing of baking powder. But now what we're going to do is slowly add in the flour. You'll see Shoshana doesn't just dump the whole thing, but she's slowly mixing it in piece by piece. We'll get up closer. Oops, we'll get closer so we can see. Slowly add in the flour.
That was 1 1/4 teaspoons of baking powder?
1 1/4 teaspoons of baking powder.
Thank you.
1 1/2 teaspoons. 1 1/2 teaspoons of baking powder.
Yeah.
And again, remember, this is a double recipe, so at home, if you want to make a smaller batch, you can have it. I think this will make between 3 to 4 dozen Hamantaschen, depending on size. So if you have it, you'll make between 1 to 2 dozen Hamantaschen.
Can I turn it up?
Yeah, so turn it up a little bit. You'll see it's making a bit of a mealy dough. You turn it up a little bit higher. And it starts to beat the dough in together. We start to get
A ball.
something that resembles a cookie dough, all right? So now let's turn it off. So now we're going to take this crumbly dough. Excuse me. Here, you of all trade places, you can man the camera.
I'm manning the camera.
We'll take this crumbly dough. Let me get it out so everyone can see. It forms a soft dough, but very crumbly because, again, it's a very hard butter, cold butter-based dough. So we're just going to take that with our hands. We're just going to mush it together. And just mush it together into a ball. So in the meantime, I'm going to mush it. Shoshana, do you mind getting the plastic wrap for me out while I do this? Thank you so much. So I'm going to take this out and just put it on the counter. And we see that even though it's a little bit crumbly from all of the butter, let me kind of point it down a little bit. You can see right here. We'll get
It comes together really nicely.
It comes together nicely. There we go. So move that, and we have right here our dough. So we're going to take this dough, and I'm going to take it and split it in half, because like I said, we're going to make a double batch, and only half of it we're going to make mojito. And one of the exciting things that I'm excited to explore more, that's very exciting about this mojito recipe, is that when I thought about it, it's very clever to mix a different flavored base cookie with a different flavored filling, because it lends itself to a lot of different cocktails and fillings. So like now I can just use this mint dough with any other kind of filling, and any other cocktail that involves mint. Well, now you'll have a mint julep or whatever it is. So I'm very excited to explore different possibilities.
What's a mint julep?
I actually am not positive it goes in a mint julep. I just know it's a mixture of mint. I'm sure people in our community are better mixologists. We need David Deutsch. I know that he's
You would know.
Yeah, he's a big mixologist. But so now we take this cookie dough here, and I'm going to take it. Here, Shoshana, do you mind holding this for me?
Yes.
Thank you so much. I'm going to take one of my favorite kitchen tools. I'm going to take my dough scraper. I use it a lot when I'm making sourdoughs, because sometimes the sourdoughs are like very wet. So you get the dough scraper under there to shape it. I'm going to take my dough scraper, just go and cut it in half. Out. We'll put this half, put it in a nice bowl on the side over here. We'll come back to that later. This half will form into a ball. And we're going to go and put that in a nice piece of plastic wrap over here.
But what about the mint?
We'll get there.
Oh, I'm not patient.
So this now is our base. And this base, just using vanilla extract, really you can leave out the vanilla extract if you want. I always include it, even if I put in mint or other flavors. But this base is really just the sugar cookie dough. And so it's a really yummy sugar cookie dough. But this is just sugar cookie dough, so you can use it for Hamantaschen, you can use it for other things, you can add other flavors to it. So now,
Rabbi, can you use almond flour instead of regular flour with this?
Yeah.
So I've never experimented gluten-free. I would assume if you try to make this with almond flour, you would also need something like tapioca starch or like a xanthan gum, something to thicken
To bind it.
Yeah, that would be my guess, but it's something to look into for sure.
Thank you.
Let me, if anyone makes it with almond flour or gluten-free, let me know, because we have gluten-free friends, so we're always looking for new alternatives.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah. So that's
All right, now what?
So now that we have this dough, so like I said, the most important thing really with this dough is that you chill it a really long time. Because when you work it, you need to make sure it stays cold enough that you can manhandle it without the butter melting. So can I show them our newest member of our family?
Oh, I don't know what you're talking about. Oh my.
So I'm gonna go and put this. Don't worry, there's no big announcements coming. I'm gonna go to put this away to chill. I'm gonna put it, and I was saying the newest member of our family, on Thursday, we just got this chest freezer. So that now, after the pandemic, hopefully, when we start hosting people, I can make a big batch of challah and just freeze it. I can make a big batch of whatever for Shabbos and freeze. So it was on sale at Costco, and I couldn't help myself. So I got the chest freezer. So I'm just gonna put that dough in the freezer for now. You can put it in the freezer, you can put it in the fridge. The most important thing is that it gets very thoroughly cold. So to that
Put it outside.
You can put it outside. That's a good idea.
We do that sometimes, actually. We put it in the office and we just open the window.
So now we're left with this other half of the dough. I did a bad job separating it, so it's a little bit more than half. Don't tell. And we're gonna make this half of the dough peppermint flavored. So it's a very easy. We're just gonna do something basic. We're gonna take a scant tablespoon of peppermint extract. Got it at Whole Foods, so not too hard to find. Some peppermint extract. And then this is like 2 to 3 tablespoons of cut up very finely fresh mint. Add some fresh mint. And then just knead it into the dough. So you just add it there. Just gonna knead it in. So you can get an action shot. Thank you. Nothing too exciting, honestly. You just knead it into the dough. You see it gets nice and dispersed. The important point for making sure the mint gets very dispersed is cutting it very finely. But there you go. Now you have a nice little mint flavored ball. And this is a ball of mint dough. And we're going to now wrap this up, put this to the side, and we'll put that in the fridge as well. So now we have our dough. And now that we have a dough, let me wrap this up. And then we'll put it in the freezer and we'll move on to our filling.
Here, I got it. You got the.
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll see. We made in advance some dough just in case that I've been chilling overnight. But we're gonna see if 20 minutes or so in the freezer is gonna be enough that by the time we finish our filling, the dough we made fresh will be ready. Okay, so for now that finished our mint dough, basic sugar cookie with some mint mix-ins. So now the next step we're gonna do is we're gonna make our filling. And our filling is essentially a custard. So a custard is an egg-based creamy mix, I guess is the way to put it. I don't know exactly how to put it. Egg-based, yeah, she's looking at me like I'm crazy.
It's like a pudding, a
yeah.
solid-ish pudding.
But the thing that defines it, obviously, is the eggs in it. And making a custard is going to be fun because it'll give us an opportunity to talk about a couple of important and interesting cooking techniques. So to start, for our custard, we're going to take a small saucepan. This is our flake-shake saucepan, flake-shake equipment saucepan. And we're going to take it and we're going to add just 1 cup of sugar. So take some sugar, white sugar, add a cup of sugar to the saucepan. Then we're going to take 3/4 of a cup of lime juice. You can squeeze it fresh, which would be great, or you can just get it from a bottle. For Shabbos last week, I made key lime pie because I found key limes, which are underratedly hard to find. And it took forever to juice these tiny little key limes.
They're so small.
It was so frustrating. Okay, so 1 cup of sugar, 3/4 cup of lemon juice here.
Lime juice.
Lime juice. In addition to the 3/4 cup of lime juice, I'm going to add a tablespoon of lime zest. So I zested a fresh lime. Got a tablespoon of lime zest in there. In addition to the lime zest, we're going to add 1/4 cup of butter, which is 4 tablespoons or half a stick. So 1/4 cup of butter, half a stick. And then in addition to the butter, we're going to add, this is very essential, 1/4 cup of cornstarch. That's going to be one of our main thickening agents. We'll add our cornstarch. In addition to the cornstarch, we'll then add, of course, how could we not remember the most important ingredient? Our rum. So we're going to add 2 tablespoons of rum. You can add more or less depending on your taste. No judgments here. So now we have our mixture of sugar, lime juice, lime zest, butter, and rum. Our flavored, fatty, sugary mixture. And we're going to put that on a medium-high heat on the stove.
Yeah, does rum need a hechsher?
So Shoshana is asking a great question in terms of cautious for alcohol. Does rum need a hechsher? So if you look at the CRC kosher list of alcohol, if you Google CRC kosher alcohol, so the CRC, the Chicago Rabbinical Council, maintains an up-to-date list of all major alcoholic brands and beverages. It's a little more machmir than maybe one has to be, so you can always run questions by me if you need to. But it's definitely like a very good starting point. And one of the things they say that seems pretty universally accepted is that white rum, clear rum, doesn't need a hechsher. Because clear rum is just straight up distilled sugar. So what could you possibly need a hechsher for? So we have, wherever it is, our extremely overpriced bottle of clear rum that we got from across the street. Even though it doesn't have a hechsher, you're good to go. When it comes to spiced or flavored rums, though, that's a little bit more complicated. And when it comes to the spiced or flavored rums there, you need to check the CRC list to find a hechsher. But so now we have this mixture of sugar, butter, and lime over a medium-high heat. And we're just going to keep mixing it with a whisk. We have our whisk over here. And we're going to keep mixing it until the butter melts. You want the butter and sugar to fully melt.
You're not on the plane.
I'm not directly on the plane. All right. Should we move? Oh, no, that's good.
Yeah. People can see.
Yeah, when we get it to a good consistency, I'll show everybody. Me and Shoshana debate the color of this. I think it's like a greenish yellow from the lime. Shoshana thinks it's a yellow.
Leead showed it to me on Friday, and he said, "Look at it, it's bright green." And I said, "I'm concerned that you think that this is bright green."
Yeah. See if you guys can see. Let's
Wait, I
point the camera down.
Here.
So
Can't see.
it's like a yellowish, greenish.
It's a yellow green.
Yeah, it's a
Yellow green.
Exactly.
Yes.
So you let it melt fully, and now it's time to do an exciting technique called tempering. So as we mentioned, one of the most important parts of a custard is the eggs.
Wait, I can keep whisking that.
Yeah,
while
you keep
explain.
whisking. Perfect. Thank you. One of the most important parts of the custard is the eggs. So we have to mix the eggs into the melting hot mixture. But as we know, when eggs get above, I think, 160 degrees or 165 degrees, they cook. So what we're going to do to get the eggs slowly to reach a higher temperature without cooking is we're going to slowly drizzle in a little bit of the hot mixture that Shoshana's whisking. And while we do that, I'm going to keep whisking to keep it moving so that the eggs don't have an opportunity to cook. That's going to be called tempering, raising the temperature of the eggs to the temperature of the sauce. And then once it's tempered, we can pour those eggs back in, and they'll add their thick, creamy texture without cooking. So we first learned this tempering. Do you remember?
Was it for the mac and cheese?
It's for the mac and cheese. There's a mac and cheese recipe we make that's very, very like rich and creamy. And part of how it's so creamy is it has a couple of egg yolks in it. And you temper the egg yolks, pour them in, and then put it in the oven to bake.
It is well worth it. That is the best mac and cheese I've ever had.
So we're gonna take 2 eggs, 2 full eggs, not just yolks here. And you're gonna wanna make sure that you have a bit of a bigger bowl because you're gonna have to constantly whisk. The most important thing about tempering is that never ever let the mixture go flat. Never let it go unmoving because then things can burn. It can ruin ruin everything. So we're gonna whisk these eggs, and then while I'm whisking these eggs, Shoshana's just gonna go and pour a very little bit of this hot mixture on the eggs while I keep mixing. Now, okay. You want to keep it on. Keep the stove on.
Careful.
Yeah, just a little bit. Oh, you should use this that side. Okay, now just a little bit more.
How do you do this by yourself?
Oh, I did it last night.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. And then one more time, with just a little bit more, and then you shouldn't turn the flame on, so we'll turn it back. We'll turn the flame off. We'll turn it back on. Perfect. Good. Now turn the flame back on to medium high, like either 7 or 8. And now I'm just gonna go and pour this hot mixture of eggs straight back in and mix.
Mix constantly.
Exactly. Constantly mix. And then you keep mixing until it cooks down. When the edges of the custard start to bubble and boil, it's not really gonna like bubble up and boil like a liquid, but you'll start to get these like gloopy bubbles around the edges. That means it's thickened, and that means it's done. So once you get gloopy bubbles on the edges, I'll show everybody when we get there in about 2 to 3 minutes, I'd say. It takes about 2 to 3 minutes on a medium-high heat of constantly whisking, and you'll get these gloopy bubbles. Another thing that's important to be careful of that happened to me last night when I was preparing is that while you're getting everything ready, make sure that the lime zest is not on the bottom of the pot of the pan, because then as soon as you turn the heat on, it might burn before you have a chance to whisk everything through, and you'll get a couple of flecks of like burnt lime zest. So that was my mistake last night that I think I've learned from. Was that my dad who buzzed us?
I don't know.
You should check the door. Yeah. In the meantime, I'm just gonna keep whisking this, and then once this gets a little gloopy, once this gets thick, it'll be ready to put in the fridge. And then from there, we'll just move on. Hey, Dad, you want to say hi to the show? Hey, Dad, my dad's here. We'll see what his new haircut is like, his new beard. Hi, come. Dad, this is the show.
Hello, Shul.
This is my dad.
If you like Leead, I'm responsible, and if you don't like Leead, I have nothing to do with it.
Nice work.
Thank you.
Leonard.
Hi. How's it like?
Oh, it's great. Wow, great. I'm glad that the bougie haircut place did a good job.
Nice meeting you guys.
Yeah,
I'm leaving.
Love you.
Love you too.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Now, don't do what I just did and stop whisking to say goodbye to Dad. All right, so we're almost there. I'll just show quickly. Perfect. I'm going to turn it off, and I'll demonstrate so everybody can see. If you look on the edges, do you see those hollow, gloopy bubbles that are developing? It's not like bubbling over, but just a couple hollow, gloopy bubbles on the edge. That means good to go. So now I'm going to go and take this. I'm going to put this in our freezer as well. So will you accompany me to the freezer?
I will accompany you to
It looked great, right?
our new
They did a good job with
favorite.
his beard. All right. So we'll put this in our freezer to cool down. Do you think this is cold enough?
I think so.
Yeah, I think so.
Wait, but Leead, don't you want to use the mint one?
This is a mint one. Oh, this isn't the
This
mint
is
one.
the mint one.
This isn't the mint one.
That's what you have in a station.
Yeah, that's why it's Shoshana. Well, there's a lot of reasons I need. So now we're gonna go and shape our dough. So we're gonna use our mint dough, which is
Freezer, babe.
in the freezer. as Shoshana recalls correctly. Perfect. So
Do
this
you
is our
want to
mixed
use the
dough.
one from last night or this one?
Oh, the one from last night's colder.
Yes, yes.
Perfect. All right.
Trade you.
So this is our little pre-prepared one to make sure it's thoroughly cold. And again, I've said this a million times, but I can't stress enough. The most important thing in this recipe is that the dough is cold enough. That way you'll be able to shape it. That way you'll be able to bake it without it spreading out. You have to make sure the rest of that it's cold enough dough. So now I'm just gonna go and take this dough and put it on my little piece of parchment paper right there. So I'm just gonna cut a piece of parchment paper. I'm gonna take my rolling pin. I'm gonna roll it out nice and thin. So it's very cold, so it's very hard. Part of this is really just feeding it down a little bit before I get it to a point I can roll it out. And there we go. Roll it out now on the parchment paper, and as you can see, it has these beautiful pieces of mint throughout it, which is really nice. So we're gonna roll it out. You want to roll it out like pretty thin, because we're gonna be trying to manipulate this dough to make a triangle. So the thinner it is, the better it is. And if it's a little bit sticky, if it's a little bit warm, you can either just pop it back in the freezer, or if you're a little desperate for time, you can sprinkle a little flour on top. It's not the end of the world. But just don't go too crazy or you'll mess up the texture. Okay, so this is good enough for now. Might be a little bit thick, but that's okay. Okay. So now we have our cut out, or now we have our rolled out dough.
I wanna
Rolled
do
out
some
dough.
rolling. Do the
Huh?
next step. I want to do a little roll.
You want to roll it a little more for fun, or because you think
For
I'm
fun.
Okay. And now I'm gonna go and get out a mason jar lid to cut the proper shape of these circles for these Hamantaschen. So you can use really anything. An upside down cup, an upside down jar. I just find these to be like perfectly sized, these little mason jar circles. So I'm just gonna use this lid of a mason jar. And as you can see, actually the event, let's make sure. As you can see, perfectly, just gonna go like that. And then, bam, like that. Make some circles here. There, do. Make another circle here. If you have actual cookie cutters, power to you. I'm sure one day I'll cave and buy them, but for now I don't. Fine. So we'll go a little simple for now. We'll only make 4. So I'll take these cookies. Perfect. So now we have these circles, our minty circles. So now to fill our minty circles, we're gonna take our filling, and again, our filling that we made together is cooling right now. So last night, I made an alcohol-free version. I made a virgin mojito. If you want to make an alcohol-free version, feel free to replace the rum with almond extract. It'll still taste tropical, taste interesting. Fun fact, almond extract also sort of substitutes as cherry extract, because almond extract is derived from cherry pits, and almonds and cherries are related. So almond extract has a sort of fruity, tropical flavor to it, as I say that down there. Okay, perfect. So now we're gonna take our little circles, and before we work them, we take the egg whites that we separated out from the 2 egg yolks that went into the dough. And now we're gonna go, and we're just going to beat these egg yolks these egg whites until they're frothy. And this is another cooking tip, another cooking method that's very useful. This is essentially a homemade edible glue, frothy egg whites. So for example, one thing I did with this before that's really fun is I took a steak, I beat some egg whites till they were frothy, I took my brush and painted the steak with it, and I put some peppercorns on it. And I had a pepper crusted steak when I grilled it. So egg whites make this glue type substance, it makes them stick to it, and then you can bake, cook, glue, whatever it is. So we're gonna use egg whites to hold together our Hamantaschen to make sure they have integrity. So we're gonna take a brush, dip it in the egg white, just brush around the edge of our circle, like that. Then we're gonna go and take a little bit of our filling, dump it in the middle, and then pinch together the ends to form a triangle. So first pinch together the 2 bottom ends, like so, and then pinch together the top, like that. And here we have a Hamantasch. We'll do that again 3 more times.
Wow.
So, okay, good, everyone's on board. This guy. Then first thing we're gonna go and brush it with our egg white to glue it, like that. Then we're gonna go take a little spoonful of our filling, mojito filling. Also, just because we're not taking the time to wait for it to naturally cool, just so everybody can see, look at the consistency of this filling once it cools down. it becomes a clear, thick custard, not like a liquid. So we have this nice custardy filling. And then we're gonna go take this guy. And just as a tip, this is another one of those times where my favorite tool in the kitchen, the pastry knife, the pastry scraper, is particularly useful. Because you can get under the dough there. Then you pinch this in the bottom corners. You pinch the top, like that. Not my best, not my worst. So we have one
Now
more.
it's
Hamantaschen. Take this guy. And if you want them bigger or smaller, it's just a question of how big you roll out your circles. Like that. Another little loop in there. Sorry, I'm not a more efficient factory here, but it's love in each Hamantaschen, you know? It's part of it. How long it takes is how good it'll taste. So now we have one more over here. And you can see they look very exotic for Hamantaschen. They have like the pretty green streaks from the mint in them. They don't look like the average store-bought Hamantaschen.
You forgot to egg wash it.
You're right, and it's okay, because first I'll put that in the middle. That's a great point. Thank you for reminding me. And now, no problem, you can just egg wash around it this time. Take that egg white and wash around it.
I saved it.
She saved it. Like that. Perfect. And now for the final touch, to be a little bit fancy. Now that we have our Hamantaschen, we'll just make 4 together. First, let's preheat our oven to 375. So I'll go over here. And the truth is, ideally, you should have preheated the oven already, but because, as you can all see, we are in a tiny East Village kitchen, when I preheat the oven, our kitchen gets hot. And that would be way too hot to work with the butter dough needed for the sugar cookies. So really, ideally, if you're like taking notes at home, first preheat your oven at 375. Everything else happens afterwards. But so now, Sean, do you mind cameraing? So for now, we have our first little batch of mojito Hamantaschen here. And we're gonna go, and just for one final fancy touch, we're gonna take some of our remaining egg white glue, take it and brush the sides of these Hamantash. Just brush them with some of our egg white. Similar to egg yolk glaze that maybe you've seen on challahs or deli rolls or other things. Do an egg whitewash. And now that we have the egg whitewash on the cookie, we're gonna take some raw sugar. This is turbinado sugar. It's just a form of raw sugar. They make brown raw sugar, they make white raw sugar. We'll take some raw sugar and just sprinkle it on the crust on the outside on the cookie. And because of our egg white, it'll stick. And when we bake it, this raw sugar won't melt or bake because it's thick grained. It can maintain the high temperature. And we'll have a nice crumbly, crunchy sugar crust on our Hamantaschen. So just another nice little fancy treat to spice them up a little. So now we'll take these Hamantaschen on the parchment paper, which by now is a little bit messy with egg whites, with filling. We'll just take the parchment paper itself. We'll put that on a baking sheet. This. And now you see, ta-da! These are our Hamantaschen, and they're about to go in the oven for 12 minutes. So 375 for 12 minutes. The truth is, since we're only baking 4, I'm only going to bake for 10 minutes and check on them because there's only 4. The oven might be a little bit hot. It might only need 10 minutes. So I'm going to 10 minutes and check. Last night I did the same thing. They needed the full 12 and I only need 6. So I probably need the full 12 anyways, but we'll start with 10. So Alexa, set timer for 10 minutes. So now,
10 minutes, starting now.
Oh no, I'm so sorry for whoever else is Alexa's about to go off in 10 minutes. That's one of the downsides always. But so now, well, first I'm going to take a drink of water. But also, while we wait for the Hamantaschen, I think I'll share just a short Bar Torah, unless Shoshana wants to share one first.
No, please.
Okay, fine.
I'll start with the cleanup.
Oh, okay, fine. So while we have 10 minutes to kill, figured I'd speak a little bit about Tanis Esther, the fast of Esther that's coming up on this Thursday right before Purim. So first of all, halachically, heads up everybody, this Thursday, Tanis Esther, there'll be, there's info in the announcements, there'll be more info coming forward, fast day, one of the minor fasts. But Tanis Esther, in terms of the minor fasts, in terms of the fast days that we're familiar with, is actually pretty unusual. Because generally speaking, fast days fall into 2 broad categories. And in fact, Rambam, when he codifies the halachot of fasting, when Maimonides talks about the laws of fasting, he breaks them into 2 categories. One category of fast is personal impending crisis. There's something going on right now, It's really pressing, so I'm going to fast so God will have mercy as a form of prayer, as a form of devotion for a personal impending crisis. I remember when I was younger, I think I was a senior in high school, Israel had gone through many years of drought, and they declared a national optional fast day, an international optional fast day for rain in Israel. And that was an impending crisis. Right now, in the present, Israel needed water, so Jews fasted for it. The other form of fast we're all familiar with is like Tisha B'Av. It's a fast day that's based off of a historical event. It's not that right now something's threatening us, but we commemorate that in the past, some scary, some hard, some difficult hardship faced us, and we overcame it. And that's like Tisha B'Av, Shavasar B'Tammuz, etc. But the difficult part, the problem is, what's the nature of Tanit Esther? Because Tanit Esther isn't a personal impending crisis. We're not fasting for anything right now. It's a historical holiday. But it's also not a commemoration of a tragedy. Unlike Tisha B'Av, which commemorates the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, what we're commemorating is ultimately victory over Haman. Why are we fasting for Tanit Esther? What type of fast is this? Why is that part of the Purim celebration that otherwise seems so happy and so celebratory? So, to that end, I want to point out to an answer of Rav Aharon Lichtenstein, one of my Rebbeim, Zecher Tzedek V'Bracha. But Rav Aharon points out that, and this is something we'll develop a little more in this week's drasha, so get excited if you're going to be there or you're going to read the drasha this week. But Rav Aharon points out that oftentimes, typically, when we see fast days, the fast days are for some specific personal need or crisis. I need water in Israel, I fast. And Esther, in the Megillah we know, she needed the king to approve her approaching him. She needed a whole bunch of diplomatic things to fall out right, to go her way. So she said she's going to fast, and she called for all the Jews to fast. And on one level, it was definitely a personal impending crisis. But Rav Lichtenstein points out, on another level, we know that the rabbis were very critical of the Jewish community of the time, pointing out that all of the Jews of the time went to Achashverosh's parties, got drunk with Achashverosh, were crazy and lascivious with Achashverosh's people, that the Jews had been steeped in the culture of the time, and they weren't so different from the downfalls and the downsides of Achashverosh's kingdom. That being the case, says Rav Aharon, we should view the fasting of Esther not just as Esther's personal needs or desires, but a moment of historical and national reckoning for the Jewish people. That when the Jewish people joined in Esther's fast, it wasn't just that they were fasting for Esther, they were praying for her cause. It was that they had done a moment of self-reckoning. They had recognized that their fate and their history lied with the Jewish people, and that now they were going to fast for the future of Judaism and the future of Torah, of what it means to be a Torah Jew. So the fast, well, in itself, might just be a fast for a personal need, for Esther's personal need. What it represents to us is the historical significance of the Jews fasting with Esther, putting their lot in together and coming together as a community to stand up for themselves and for their own needs. That it was only through the communal joining together of fasting, caring for each other, and working together as a community that the Esther story, the Purim story, was really possible. And of course, this expresses itself throughout the day. That Purim is a day of community. It's a day full of giving gifts to each other, giving gifts to the poor, having meals together, something that unfortunately we'll have to be creative about as we try to recreate this year during COVID. But what we see, I think, is that this emphasis is really on the communal aspect, on the idea that the Jewish people had a turning point and not just a fast day. And this is also expressed in the rabbinic literature. We know the rabbis say, Kimu v'kiblu, kimu masha kiblu kvar. That when the Megillah says that the Jews accepted the Megillah, what it really means is they re-accepted all of the Torah. That the rabbis intrinsically tie this to Har Sinai, the receiving of the Torah, in that moment of communal revelation. Because part of what we're doing here is not just fasting for the protection of the Jewish people, but engaging in a moment of historical national reckoning. What do we want our future to be? What do we want our identity to be? So we see a little bit better, we can understand a little more from the Esther story. Why is it that Tanis Esther is so important? How could it fit into this paradigm of other holidays? This Tanis Esther really is our opportunity to reflect nationally on, is our stake, is our role, is our investment with our nation, with our Jewish people, with the future of the Torah mitzvah, with God's vision? Or is it something that's been misguided, that's been taken a little bit off track, that we have to refocus and double our efforts? It gives us that opportunity to ensure that everything we do is l'shem shamayim, for heaven's sake, but more than that, or more specifically, I guess, than that, for the community's sake. That we're engaged together, that we're involved together, and we're all involved in one enterprise, one project of Torah and mitzvah together. So hopefully that explains the Tanis Esther, one of the more peculiar, a little bit of the rare fasts, a little bit better. Happy to field any other questions. Just as a side note, while we wait for the baking to finish, how much time is left? I'm not sure.
To get better.
Alexa, how much time is left on my timer? Sorry, guys. So we have 3 minutes and 30 seconds. For the record, the next time I go too long in a Shabbos drasha, remember, I can go too short also. But so just as while we're waiting for the last 3 minutes, as a little bit of a plug, the Shiurim this week will have a Purim theme. So looking forward to seeing everybody at Shiurim this week to learn more about Purim. And then on Thursday night, we'll have Purim with the Shul at 6:25 Maariv, followed by Megillah, which will be streamed on Zoom. And then Friday morning, 8:30 in the Shul. And Megillah will be after Leining around 9. And from 10 to 12 on Friday, from 12 to 2 on Friday, everybody is welcome to stop by. Shoshana and I will be in our outdoor dining / chilling area. It's a very large space, very COVID safe if you feel comfortable. And we'll have individually packaged mishloach manot for everybody. So everybody should feel free to stop by, to come say hi on Friday. Hopefully,
warmly, of course.
Yeah, and hopefully between the Zoom shiurim and the Friday meeting and laning over Zoom, we'll be able to see everybody celebrate Purim with everybody together. But stay tuned for the announcements. Oh, Shoshana's making more cookies. Thank you.
I might as well.
Yeah, you might as well. That's great. All right, and now we can check in on our cookies. I was also going to make an actual mojito, like the mixology drink, but I'm not a good at mixology. And when I looked it up, I saw that it can go really bad and just basically tastes like dirty mint. So I'm not going to risk it. But hopefully soon.
You're also going to take truma.
Oh, that's also true. Yeah, we bought a bag of produce of pomelas from Costco, and they're from Israel. So I was like, oh great, I have to take truma amaser, I have to tithe it because produce from Israel. You're not sure whether or not tithes were taken. So the halach is, if you see produce from Israel, out of chumrah, out of stringency, you don't say a bracha, it doesn't count as a mitzvah, but you put a little bit aside as a tithe. And there's a little statement you can say, but whatever, not so important. You put a little bit aside as a tithe. So I was like so excited to do that at the show. I was like, great. The beginning of the cooking class will take truma. Last week was Parshat Truma. It's like really thematic. And then I saw the bag said made from Israel, OU kosher. Because it has a hechsher, that means that it's certified that Truma Meiser was taken and I don't have to take any. So, I mean, I'm happy that Truma Meiser was taken. I'm happy that was the halachic fruit, but it took away some of my halachic fun. But that's halachic fun. Yeah, you don't get as much halachic fun in the kitchen. Hopefully you don't get halachic fun in the kitchen. We try to be as not fun and creative as possible. But actually, that reminds me that this Shabbos, so we'll have a lot to talk about when it comes time for Pesach. This Pesach this year is a particularly unique situation. We have Erev Pesach falling out on Shabbos. But less unique, but still interesting, is this Purim. Because this Purim, we have our Suda, we have the meal we all eat together, falling out Erev Shabbat, right before our Shabbat meal. So it's a whole interesting discussion how exactly it's going to play, how exactly it should ideally play out. 2 basic approaches that people adopt. The mainstream approach, and then there's going to be what Shoshana and I are going to do. So the mainstream approach that develops is that really you can't have your Suda for Purim until after Mincha time, the earliest time to daven Mincha. So after Mincha time, 12, 1 o'clock or so, have your Suda, have a lunch meal, finish in time for Shabbos, bench, and then you'll have your Shabbat meal. And that's what most people will probably do. Definitely recommend to everybody, a great option to have your Purim Suda for lunch, Shabbat for dinner. What we're going to do, because we're going to be hosting all the standing stuff and running around, etc., all day, we're going to do a Shabbat meal that doubles as a Purim Suda, which is its own, Alexa, stop, which is its own complicated halachic fun. But essentially what we're going to do is we're going to start our Purim Suda about an hour before sunset. Then come sunset, we're going to daven Kabbalat Shabbat together with everyone at the Suda. We're going to spread it's called Pores Mappa is the term in the Gemara. You spread a tablecloth over the table. You say Kiddush. Because of Shabbos, you have to say Kiddush and sanctify the day. But since you've already drank wine at your meal, you don't say Hagafen in Kiddush, because you've already said a Hagafen. So you say Kiddush without the blessing on wine, which is very strange. And then you don't wash again, because you already washed Hamotzi for your meal. So you just keep eating your bread. So we're going to do that. It's a very interesting, complicated, rare opportunity. But for everybody else, feel free to do that. If you want to reach out to me, we can go over the halachas of it. But the simpler thing, you have your Suda, lunch, dinner, you move on to Shabbos. And then you have Shushan Purim, but in America, outside of walled cities, we're not celebrating Shushan Purim too much. But so our timer just went off. So now we can go and check on our Hamantaschen. See our Hamantaschen. We could use maybe like another minute. We'll give them like another minute or two to brown up.
They look good though.
They look pretty good.
I do say so myself.
If the dough was, so actually one of the things you can see already, is that the dough, while it did hold its shape pretty well, the very first time I ever made Hamantaschen was years ago, and I tried to just pinch it into a triangle, and it just cooked out into a circle. And it was just like a circle with a dab of jelly on top, and I was very frustrated. So our egg white trick did work. The dough did keep its circle shape, but because we have our tiny kitchen with its overly hot oven and we're a little bit rushed, the temperature was a little bit too low. So you'll see, it still looks great. It still is a perfectly fine cookie, but you can already see we don't have perfectly straight edges on our cookie. It's a little saggy because it was a little soft. The butter melted a little bit before it was done. But nonetheless, anybody else in a normal kitchen in a normal circumstance, I think you'll be good to go. Okay, so I think we've given them maybe like another minute or so. Oh, I won't turn the oven off because Shoshana's got another batch. Just to show everybody, Shoshana's much better at this than I am. Look how pretty Shoshanas are coming out. Yeah, Shoshanas are coming out as perfect triangles.
Stop.
Oh, fun facts while we wait for the cookies to finish, 2 more minutes. I looked up a little bit the historical tradition for eating Hamantaschen. So very, very contested. So there's basically 2 traditions, two arguments. One argument is that Hamantaschen is just a description of a poppy cookie. Man, we know, or mana is another term for poppy, and tash is Yiddish for a pocket. So
Well, that makes a lot of sense.
it just means a poppy pocket. And it was just a dessert people ate in the old world. And people are smart and funny, and they said, oh, hey, man pocket, Haman pocket sounds a lot like Haman, so let's start eating it in Purim. And that's probably what happened. So that's almost definitely the historical origin. But what people do point out, which is fascinating, is that the Gemara in Megillah, Tet Vav Amud Aleph, 15a, says that when Haman was brought out to the gallows, he was brought out sullen, mournful, and oznav mekutafim. His ears were snipped. It actually says that. It says that in the Gemara, and it turns out it's actually a practice. One of the many cruel practices of punishment in the old world was that people on death row, they would snip their ears. So if they ran away, you would have like a sign that they were on death row and they're actually liable to death penalty. So people say that's why there's special attention paid to Haman's ears. There's some sort of focus on Haman's ears because of that. Very, very weak. The other thing people say,
and in Hebrew, Oznei Haman.
Oznei, exactly. That's why in Hebrew they're called Oznei Haman. And that actually, it addresses a very important problem. If the origin is just the Yiddish word for poppy pocket, then why in Hebrew is it called Oznei Haman? It should also just be Hamantash in Hebrew. So maybe it's Oznei Haman because it comes from this midrash.
Yes.
So the last answer I saw, the Nitziv's father, Rav Naftali Tzvi Yehuda Berlin, so his father, Rav Berlin, brings the answer that the midrash in the Esther Rabbah says on the pasuk of B'layla hahu nadadash natamelech. On that night, King Ahasuerus' sleep was disturbed. So the midrash says, what disturbs King Ahasuerus' sleep? And the midrash says that the 3 patriarchs got together, came before God, and said, you have to do something about what's happening to the Jews. So it says from the Naftali Tzvi Berlin, to honor the patriarchs, the 3 patriarchs, we eat a cookie that's mishulash, that has 3 sides. It's a cute idea, but it's
Nice.
yeah, but it doesn't really explain the entirety of the little triangle pocket.
No, not really.
All right, so I think I've stalled enough that we can take out our Hamantaschen. They start to brown around the edges. Ah, there you go. That's nice and pretty.
Rabbi,
Yeah, George, for sure.
what do the Svarim? How do they make Hamantash as well?
That's actually a really good question. I don't know. Because I presume this is definitely a European minhag. There's no question in the books that this is as ashki as it gets. I don't know. Does anyone know Spartans have Hamantaschen or a different tradition?
Yeah, they have
Sorry, Diane, what'd you say? We couldn't hear you.
Risa.
They have Hamantaschen.
Oh, Risa's talking. Oh, so, okay, I'm sorry. Risa and Diane are talking. Risa, what were you saying?
Me?
Yeah, Risa. Yeah, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, they have Hamantaschen. My daughter is married to a Syrian, and they have Hamantaschen.
Oh, they also have Hamantaschen? Okay, so it's one of those things, I guess, that transcends old cultures. That was a good question. So you can see now, ideally, obviously, you should let your cookies cool a little bit longer. But we see that we have a perfect little mojito Hamantaschen. We have our raw brown sugar on the edge. That's a nice little crispy brown sugar. We have our yellow custardy filling. and our nice mint cookies, and you can see the pretty green specks throughout the mint cookies. So we made 4 of these now, but you can feel free to make dozens. Shoshana just made 4 more that she's gonna put in soon. But we have our beautiful mojito Hamantaschen. So I hope everybody had fun cooking with us, baking with us today. If anyone has any questions or anything, please feel free.
If you make your own, please post a picture on Facebook
Yeah.
in the thread. Just write a comment on the event and just upload your picture so everyone can